Okay. Before we formally start the session, there are again a few new faces. As this is about networking, may I invite those who haven't been there in the morning to shortly introduce themselves if they already made it into the room. This will as well be attractive for others then come into the room and to see who new people are. And I've seen, yes, one face I see. I'll just run around. Maybe you can as well help me to find you.
Hello everybody, I'm Cléolo Swan from SIAP, which is the Greater Paris Sanitation Utility, and especially in charge of the international cooperation, so totally dedicated to sanitation and international. South.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Gilstorf. I'm a water and sanitation specialist with the World Bank, and I work on water supply and sanitation projects in Africa as well as the Middle East.
And you're the one for the more difficult questions. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Sachin and I work with Frank Water Projects. It's a UK-based NGO, and I work in the India and Nepal programs, and my work's monitoring and evaluation. Thank you.
You did already, no? Yeah. I don't remember, but you definitely did.
I'm Dipinder Kapoor from NIUA Delhi and part of a capacity building initiative in India with a lot of partners.
Okay. You're late. Who are you? One sentence.
I'm Ulrike Pokorski. I'm heading the water policy team in Eschborn for GIZ, and I also lead a program called Sanitation for Millions.
Thanks a lot. Anybody who is new? Yes, please.
Hi. My name is Frank van der Valk. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Integrity Network. Unfortunately, on this Saturday, we always have clashing meetings about our networks, but glad to be here, at least very tiny part of your meeting.
Thanks a lot. I think it's since 11 years the Saturday, and there is a tradition of competing meetings. Anybody else who is new and hasn't introduced himself? Oh, yes. Yes, yeah. But...
I'm Binayak Das. I'm also with Water Integrity Network, and I'm Program Coordinator for Tools and South Asia.
Okay, thank you. So I hand over to the moderator.
Yeah, I'll start. I've got a microphone,
so yes. So
I'm all set. So we have, for an hour now, we have a joint session on two topics, as you can see from the program. We'll be talking about capacity development. I actually prefer capacity development instead of building, because building sounds like it has to start from the start, but it can also develop. There's certainly already something there, but it needs to develop further. And then we'll have a session, half-an-hour session on governance, issues of integrity. And I'm co-chairing this with Manal. So my name is Chris Turbrick. I'm from Eabag Sandek. I briefly introduced myself before, working on sanitation issues and waste issues since many years. Manal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, again, I'm Manal. I'm working in Borda Wiska in Jordan. I'm working now on WANA chapter as a researcher, but before that I was working in Anti-Corruption Commission in Jordan. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll start with the capacity development part. And I don't really want to give a long introduction. I think it's probably obvious to all of you that if we want to reach these SDG water and sanitation issues, the gap of the professional sector, of having the people that know what they're doing and know what they're talking about and can actually implement, can help us reach that level, is really an enormous gap. So we really need to find ways of how we can accelerate this knowledge building or knowledge development, especially, of course, in the countries of concern, so that we can actually achieve those targets. I'll just like to introduce Sterenn Philippe, is with CAWST. CAWST, an organization, of course, that is very specialized in education training. She has been with them for 4 years. Focusing on capacity development and sanitation. kind of delivering trainings, developing trainings, also exploring new learning strategies. And she will give a short introduction and then also invite other people to kind of give their views, among which I will also be one. So I kind of have two hats on. Sterenn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, the session is on capacity development. And as Chris said, I think we all agree that there is a huge gap and that capacity development is very important. So I won't take this time to advocate for capacity development, but we did want to take this opportunity to try and define what capacity development is. It isn't just training. It isn't just online courses, and it isn't just a platform. So what is capacity development, and what does capacity building or developing people's capacities mean? And so to start off, I'm going to ask you to define the term capacity development. So I'd like you to turn to your neighbors and for 1 minute, try to define capacity development. What does it mean to you? 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute is over. Okay, so how did you guys find that? Was that easy? Was it easy to define capacity development? I don't know. I'll speak for myself. I find it very hard to define capacity development. It's quite a broad term. And one of the most common definitions is actually the UNDP definition, some of you might be familiar with. So the process through which individuals, organizations, and societies obtain, strengthen, and maintain the capabilities to set and meet their own development objectives over time. So now, I'd like you to return to your groups and discuss how this definition was different or similar to what you had talked about. You have another minute to discuss. Okay, 1 minute is up. I wish I could be part of all these conversations to know what you're talking about, but it sounds like you had some fruitful conversations. So there's a lot of elements to this definition, and one of the ones I want to highlight that sometimes I think we forget is that there are 3 levels to capacity development. as here, individuals, organizations, and societies, sometimes also known as enabling environment, which has led to, this is another way to visualize what capacity development is, which is individuals with skills and knowledge in functional and adequately resourced organizations able to work effectively within the local and national operating environment. This was Richard Carter's definition. So now we've seen two different definitions of capacity development. Both are quite theoretical. So I think the best way to actually understand capacity development a bit better is to have three organizations that do capacity development and present on how they do that. So we will have CAWST, SNV, and AVAG present briefly. I have given them a bit of a challenge, which I asked them to have 4 slides with only images, trying to represent the need, the target audience, the activities that they delivered, and what happened after these capacity development activities. I thought it might be a fun challenge. I don't know if that feeling is mutual, but we'll see. So to start off, I'd like to invite Millie from CAWST to present on a CAWST capacity development approach.
Okay, thank you, Sterenn. I wanted to start by showing you this picture that came from India. So CAWST works with a network of 1,200 clients around the world, and we learn from those clients. And they have varied needs, but one of the challenges that we were hearing about was poorly designed and constructed latrines. And so in this case, this is a septic tank. But given that we have a lot of sanitation expertise in the room, I'm wondering if anyone can tell me this is kind of an unusual design, what some of the shortcomings of this design might be. Anyone ready to? Sorry? Yeah, thanks. Stefan?
We don't see the outflow. We only see probably a pipe from which we can assume that this is where the shit is coming down the pipe with some water. We don't see any outflow. We see only a very small compartment which will overflow very soon, but we don't see where's the outflow. And then if there's the if that should be the first compartment behind it, how is the connection between the two? So you've given us an incomplete picture. We don't see the whole picture, but okay, this is my comment.
Thanks. Actually, for some reason on this one, that pipe on the side, in what should be the first compartment, is the outflow over here. I don't know why they chose to have it cross and have this be the first compartment and then go back to the other one. I would add to that, there's nothing to stop the scum layer from moving from one compartment to the next or from going into the outlet pipe. And it's missing some T's on the inlet and outlet to stop mixing or to reduce mixing. Yeah, a few problems here. Our target audience was masons, and so we found that although masons are trained in masonry skills, they are rarely trained on latrine design and construction. And yet they need to understand the engineering of a latrine as well as user preferences so that they can meet demand. And so, to address this need, we developed a 5-day latrine design and construction workshop targeted to masons. So the training covers both theory and practical so that they're ready to apply their knowledge the following week when they go back to their day-to-day activities. It also covers those engineering aspects as well as user preferences and on a range of latrine options that may be applicable to the local context. And so although this 5-day workshop that we developed is a generic one, we work with our partners to adapt it to the local context. And in countries where we have water expertise and training centers, an instructional designer or a WASH advisor from CAWST would work with that local partner to adapt it to the local context. So this is a picture from a workshop in Cambodia. In terms of what's next, in this picture you can see ENFO, our partner in Nepal, employees inspecting progress on a latrine construction in a village where almost all the homes were destroyed in the 2015 earthquake. So we know that training isn't enough for this challenge, and so our partners provide ongoing support. And we also recognize that proper design and construction of latrines is only one challenge in sanitation. There are many others. So our capacity building is focused not only on different topics, but on different roles. So we develop different workshops for the different roles within a sanitation program. And so some of the others we've developed are a training for program managers to overcome implementation challenges. So things like demand creation, finances, stakeholder engagement. And where we've developed a training and consulting support for community agents who often play a key role in latrine programs but face various challenges in communication and relationship management in the community. So I'm going to pass it on to Antoinette from SMV for another example.
Okay, thank you, Millie. Yes. So SNV is a capacity building organization, and we call almost all our staff advisors, understanding that it is not our responsibility to increase, for example, wash services in any area. It's the responsibility of local government, who are duty bearers, right? SuSanA talks a lot about urban SAN. I thought I should take a rural SAN example of how we work on capacity development. And this is the Sustainable Sanitation Hygiene for All program that is running in 11 countries full-fledged. So, yeah, what can I say? The visible need for us is really only the tip of the capacity iceberg. As presented by Sterenn, we really look at individual capacities, organizational capacities, and interinstitutional capacities, what you would call enabling environment. We don't use the word enabling environment or systems too generally because it doesn't clarify who is doing what. And we think that in systems it's always very important to be clear who is doing what and what capacities are needed, even if you're talking about the broader system. I see it moved because we pasted PowerPoints into other PowerPoints, yeah? So when you talk about target audiences, it means that you should work with the different stakeholders in a given location and go all the way with them, seeing to achieve full coverage in that district. It means you have to work with government, different agencies within the local government, with private sector, with civil society, and also with user groups or communities, and each within their roles. Because capacity building is not putting everybody together and give one uniform training. It is about the different roles and also supporting the stakeholders to negotiate and understand each other's roles so that they can work better together. A lot of problems are around multi-stakeholder collaboration and alignment. When you said, okay, what is our approach or what activities do we do? I thought, how do we summarize that? If we work on supply chain development for private sector, specific latrine construction, but also regulation, local ordinances, how do I summarize that? I think for us, it's still essentially that COLP learning cycle where you want people to experience. So you don't want to just lecture. You want people to experience and then reflect on that experience and improve and adapt on it. And as I said, go all the way with these stakeholders. That means that in our monitoring system, for example, we measure on one hand the levels of access, use, hygiene, among users, but we also measure key performance indicators for the different stakeholders. What is your capacity to steer demand creation in your area? What is your capacity to roll out behavior change communication? So that they really reflect on that annually and try to see progress. That's not always easy because, you know, for example, in Uganda, we just had a whole lot of districts which were split up and had new staffs, or after an election there can be a whole lot of people who change. So if you are working with 90 districts, you can't be doing, I thought it would be useful to mention this issue of scaling, because in view of the SDGs, we're all very conscious that scaling is urgent. But scaling actually is continuously learning again, because you think you've cracked the approach, but you can't just do horizontal scaling more of the same, right? You need to see how to build that gradually into higher systems, and then you also need to see how standardized approaches can be then again adopted to different contexts. And this supposed to be three-dimensional scaling figure is from WHO ExpandNet. Well, they developed it, I made the figure. And I think this is particularly useful for rural sanitation to think through how is your scaling strategy. I would recommend WHO ExpandNet for everybody. And as Martin said, I will take the opportunity to also tell you that we have a side event on the Tuesday morning where we talk more about the rural sanitation program that we've been running. Also, some research that Emery has been doing with our data over the last 4 years across 11 countries, looking at what worked, equity, and so on. So you're all invited to that event beyond the finish line. Thank you very much, and I would like to invite Chris.
Yes, thank you. I don't need the mic. Oh. I've got one.
Yes.
And I can already tell you we didn't meet the challenge. Also because I gave the slides to do to our leader of the training and education group. So Fabian Sutter made the presentations, and I'm only doing PowerPoint karaoke here. So I'm not sure that's on a different side. Sorry about that. Yeah. Oops. Go away. Where's it? Okay. So I just want to give you a brief overview of the different things that we're doing. So we're really targeting tertiary educated people, so people that have a university degree. Of course, many of our elements also are open to others, but the target audience is on that tertiary level, so quite different from, I think, from the different ones that are presented before. Of course, as a research institution and affiliated to university, we have the classical lecture style or mandated training sessions in lecture with students. And I won't talk about that in this, but I'll talk about the other 4 briefly. MOOCs, open studies, consulting, and e-learning. So you're all familiar, I hope, with the MOOCs that we have. We're currently running 4 different courses in the broader sector of WASH on water, planning and design of sanitation, solid waste, and fecal sludge management. What you see here are the student numbers. So enrolled students around 80,000, active students, those are those that are looking videos and doing exams, are 50,000. And then the ones that do everything, all the exam pass up to the final destination are around 12%, 13%. which is actually for online courses, in case you don't know, is a very high percentage. Usually it's below 10%, because of course many people also watch certain videos without even having the target of getting a certificate or getting to the end, because they just want to know something about one specific topic. And then once they've learned that, they kind of drop out. So from the statistics, they look like dropouts, but of course, our hypothesis is, and we hope that they have actually looked at the video and have learned something which they can use in their profession. What we also have, besides these online courses, because of course online courses, you're very familiar with that, have this problem of kind of not being face-to-face, of course that loses a lot of quality. So thinking about how can we design that together, and here is what we call these CAWST or these POS, so Certificate of Open Studies, where we combine the MOOC elements with a certificate, but then add on a face-to-face component with the research design training and then a capstone project work, which is then integrated into a university, into a course with a professor, with a teacher, going through this to come to a diploma, which also then is accredited by the university as a full-fledged course, which the MOOC alone is not. So the meetups is the added value, so this face-to-face element, and then of course the diploma as an added value. The third I would like to talk about is not the student level, but actually the professionals, and here it was mentioned this kind of the brotherhood you mentioned, Martin, of consultants that actually are not very familiar with these new innovations and are kind of still caught up in the conventional thinking, and how can we kind of move those along to also kind of build their capacity and also think a bit differently, plan differently, consult differently. And so here, this project CONCAD is building consulting capacity for citywide inclusive sanitation, and you kind of see the structure here. So the team, but there we're working through partner training institutes. The countries are in South Asia and in Africa. So India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and in Africa it's Zambia, Uganda, and Cote d'Ivoire. And then we have different levels of target audience, junior, mid-level, and executive, which of course, because of their limited time availability, also get a different kind of input on their kind of need for training. What we really think is very important is that there is a very strong incentive to actually take training, to learn something, because with that, the motivation is winning more bids, more contracts, especially when organizations like World Bank or Asian Development Bank takes this as a precondition to be able to apply for tender or make an offer to have such a training. That of course gives it much more value. And then the final thing, which I don't want to forget, is that at the moment all these online courses are very much north driven, so they're given by organizations in the north. What we really want to push for is also making this available for our South partners, for universities in the South, in the global South, to develop their own courses. And here we're also pushing this and trying to teach or show how online courses can be done. So it's not about the content, it's more about the methodology here. And here you see an example of a training course that we gave in Burkina Faso to Deuxieux, a regional university, so that they actually can produce their own modules for professionals in their region. And with that, I think I'm done.
Okay, moving now to our second topic. Do you want to take? There's one more part. Okay.
So thank you to all the presenters. Now that we have a common understanding of capacity development, I'd like to take just a few minutes to share with you some of our findings from our project, CAWST project, called Scaling Up Capacity Building in Non-Sewered Sanitation. So we've been working in 12 different countries, and we've done a landscape study where we were trying to understand the supply and the demand of capacity development. And there's a lot of exciting work happening. There's a lot of work, but some researchers in capacity development have called these islands of excellence. When what we really need to achieve the SDGs is more of a Pangea of excellence. And what I mean by that is that there is a need for capacity builders to coordinate our efforts and to start looking at capacity development in a more holistic way. So by coordination, what we mean two things. We mean that we need to target these three levels: individual, organizational, and the enabling environment. If we target only one level, we won't achieve the impact that we are looking for. The other meaning of coordination, we need to develop capacity of individuals and organizations based on competencies. As an example, in the sector, I think we kind of have a tendency to focus on technical competencies when there are a lot more competencies than just the technical aspects. So if I use this example of an emptying business, yes, they have to do operation and maintenance, but they also probably have to do marketing, financial management, relationship management, and administration. And so we need to understand the functions and the roles of these individuals and organizations to understand, to do a proper needs assessment, to understand where their needs are and to address those needs. And that also means that we'll probably have to coordinate with capacity builders outside of the sanitation sector to address those other potential needs. And so if you're interested, I know that was a short summary of our project, but if you're interested in learning more about capacity development and some of the challenges, we are meeting working group 1, which is capacity development. We're meeting tomorrow here at, well, over there at SEI from 10 to 11:30. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for these informative presentations. Now we are going to move for our second topic. It's the role of integrity in effective water governance. Let us welcome Mr. Binayak from Water Integrity Network. He's working for Water Integrity Network since 6 years. He has 16 years experience in water and environmental issues. And he is responsible for developing the integrity tools. And he is now working as a project coordinator in South Asia. Thank you.
So good afternoon. Let me just, it's good to look at capacity development, and I think this is where I think we find it very interesting that the last slide which you had about competence groups, I think this is where we are also trying to work, because you need to build, if you have to build integrity, you have to look at those space as also. So coming back, the Water Integrity Network, we have been part of participating in SuSanA for quite some time in different events. I think last time was the World Water Forum in Brazil where Frank was present. And today we are happy to be here to share a bit more about our work and also to raise the topic of corruption, I think, which is very important, though sensitive. And so how do we try to tackle it? I think that's very important. So our vision is for a world with equitable and sustained access to water. And obviously we are talking about sanitation also here and a clean environment, which is no longer threatened by corruption, greed, dishonesty, and willful malpractice. In relation to sanitation, I'm sure you all are, during your projects, during your work, you're coming across a lot of these issues, and maybe it's one of the major concerns, and how do we try to tackle it? So we work with the core values of integrity, transparency, accountability, participation, and anti-corruption. I don't think these are new terms for you. You're very much aware and are probably also working with it. What I would like to say is that, like, when you talk of corruption, it leads to a little bit of, no, I don't want to go into that space, it's sensitive, and we rather work in a different way. at WIN, what we try to do is like, okay, we know there is a problem, there is an issue of corruption. Let's not like point fingers, but let's try to work on the topic. And let's look at it from a perspective of strengthening integrity in the sector. And another thing about corruption is that like, it's something which one organization or one person cannot really address. So it has to be done through partnerships, through networks. And currently WIN is actually implementing our strategy, which is from 2017 to 22, which is engaging with partners for change. And this is what we would like to see here and discuss here more about. We have been working now, I think, for more than 10 years. We started as part of Transparency International. Advocacy was an important element because we had to convince even organizations like ours, other organizations working in the sector, to work on the topic of corruption. Networking is important, capacity building and capacity development. I think that's, yeah. And research is something which we undertake also, and ultimately tools. And this is something which have become quite a bit of a mainstay for WIN, applying different kinds of tools for strengthening integrity or assessing integrity issues. So just briefly in one slide, I'd like to just highlight that like what we are trying to do is like we have key tools, but the tools portfolio keeps extending. There are a lot of tools which are adapted, very adaptable, flexible for various sectors, subsectors. So we had, for example, working with the private sector, we had something on stewardships, how to look at integrity issues in stewardship processes, benchmarking, what we are trying to now develop. AWIS was one of the old tools, and this is something I'll talk about a bit later, which is annotated water integrity scan and assessment tool and evaluation tool. Project focused tools also we have, and also organization, like strengthening institutions and organization. One of the key tools, which is called the integrity management toolbox. We have been applying it in various contexts and water utilities, with communities, working on water sanitation projects, etc. So the tools are very flexible and adaptable. So this helps in monitoring, it helps in, we are trying to develop integrity indicators based on these tools. We are also now going for baseline data generating during our projects. Ultimately, we also have some other plans which are on benchmarking and certification. What you like to do, what we try to do is we are trying to see like if we can provide more trainings around the tools, because we need a lot of people who can actually be able to apply these tools and processes in countries. Undertake collaborative projects for assessments, data generation, and organizational change management. And this is where I think there might be some options for discussions later. So moving forward, I'll come back because water integrity network. So it's like, okay, your water, I mean, where is your link to sanitation? Maybe we can be also sanitation integrity network SIN. But coming back, I think we have one key project which I would like to highlight here. And this is related to this tool called the Annotated Water Integrity Scan, which was developed as one of the primary or first tools with IRC quite some time back, where basically what happens is we look at the three pillars of integrity, transparency, accountability, and participation. And we have what you call a scoring mechanism there, where people anonymously score in a workshop. Like it started more as a national level assessment of integrity in water sector. And people anonymously score, and then they discuss the scoring in an annotated way, and then look at the averages. Now, what happens is like these discussions sometimes can become very, what you call, you have to manage it very, like because it's sensitive, so people are sometimes, it can turn into accusation, accusing one another. So this tool helps in avoiding the finger pointing and rather coming up with ways to discuss the issue, take out what are the inherent things which are not always on the top, on the surface, and then try to see like, okay, what can be done about it? Now this tool, what we have done is, and this is where it's linked more to SuSanA and sanitation, is we have adapted it for school wash. And first the adaptation happened in India. We worked with FANSA, Freshwater Network for South Asia, in Andhra Pradesh. And the interesting thing is, now we have taken, when we are talking about school wash, we have taken the tool to schools. So even school students are participating in this process, and which we find very interesting, that students themselves are able to look at like, are there sanitation processes or there like toilets, etc., are, you know, like, are they aware of it? What are the rules? What are the regulations? Who is responsible? Or if they can know more about it, and if they can also participate in improving it. Now what we have done is taken this tool, and we have started a new project in Bangladesh. And we are now collectively assessing the integrity of water and sanitation management in 3 components in Bangladesh, looking at the what you call availability of clearly defined rules. I mean, Bangladesh has a circular, government circular, which has a set of rules to which the schools need to comply. At the moment, the workshops are going on in 30 schools. We have 30 schools where the project is ongoing. Application of adherence to existing rules, access to information and ability to support decision making. Can the participants, I mean, it's not only students, but also like the school management committee, parent teachers association, are they all part of such processes? And we are focusing on, I mean, looking at it from the sanitation facilities, access of water, etc., looking at the gender and the menstrual hygiene factors, the disabled, do they have the access, and budget and expenditure. Talking about budget and expenditure, we have also adapted the tool since it's an adaptation, like looking at what has been, GIZ had a project, I think Bella knows more about it here, Fit for School. So we have also adapted some of the elements from that project of theirs into this tool. And interesting thing, what we are doing also is like, we have started a separate randomized control trial project when we are currently applying this tool in these schools. So with the Stockholm University and our local partners, NGO Forum and DORP in Bangladesh, we are also trying to see if this kind of a tool actually helps in bringing in change, is providing information, is a discussion around the topic, brings in some more, reveals some more information, and that actually provides change. So this is something which we are currently also, we had our first data collection, and now the workshops are happening. And later next year, we'll again assess and see like if there any change has happened. Apart from that, with the whole AWIS tool, we intend to have a longer term advocacy program at the district and at the state level and in the country level. And also we see opportunities of scaling up with other sanitation programs. What I would like is like not to go into the details. It will be good to have interaction. I mean, since WIN and the topic of corruption, we would like to also know more from your side. I mean, Frank is also here who can talk a little bit more of like, where do you see the possibilities? What are your experiences? So we have just 4 questions here, which I'd like to just put it up here. And then maybe question by question, I don't know how much time you have. You can probably see like 15 minutes. So like, there are 4 questions here, and it'll be good to get some reflections from your end. Where do you see like what issues have you come across in relation to corruption and integrity, in relation to sanitation? Or how are you coping and resolving such issues? Do you rely on specific tools? How relevant are projects like the School Wash project, which I briefly mentioned here, and integrity tools, which for SuSanA and the overall sanitation sector? And where can there be opportunities of collaboration with WIN or also generally in networks, also with the SuSanA network?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll leave it open to the floor now.
Thank you. Maybe we can just leave these questions up and then now ask, and maybe there's some questions for the capacity development session as well, and just kind of open the floor. Yep, would you like to start?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, the second one kind of reminds me of some of the work that I've been doing. The capacity to do bookkeeping is actually a sophisticated skill. But if you have partners that see you as a source of money, you get offered all sorts of methods and ways for them to get rich and you to get poor. So, for example, fake receipts. Yeah. And bills for this, that, and the other, and things that are being done behind your back as a project manager. I don't know if simple methods are the solution there. It's confrontation, but it has to be in a nice way to retain friendship. So, but I would say that we have to share skills about how finances work and stuff like that to sort of make it a little more sophisticated than it's just how thick is my wallet compared to my partner.
So, what previously was there about the different areas, like in your last presentation about the areas where, for example, you need to strengthen system. What we are trying to do is, one of the tools which we have, the integrity management toolbox, is more like strengthening the institutions, strengthening the systems. So we are not talking about corruption there. What we're trying to do is like, how do we strengthen the financial, the auditing system, the management system within an organization, within an institute, for example, in a water utility. How do we strengthen it? So this is what we're trying to do. How do you strengthen the procurement process? How do you ensure that the human resource process actually is running smoothly and it does not really lead to gaps and loopholes? This is some kind of thing which we are working in different projects. Primarily, it comes working with water utilities, with river basin organizations, where they have to, the chances of large-scale corruption like these, fake bills, etc., exists a lot. And I'm also, like, we do come across some examples when it comes to wash and school wash projects. And this is where we need to strengthen the mechanisms and the capacities. And it's a bit of a challenge there, because what we are talking about when we are talking about finance management, we are talking about human resource management, we are talking about our formalized world where systems are in place, where management, like people with a lot of education, etc., coming and managing in water utility, etc. But like in a rural wash context with communities and all, it's a difficult process, and this is where we need to also see how we can build the capacities that they can tackle this.
Okay, there's one over here.
Yeah, thanks. Well, my experience was that actually very often it's the salary structure which is such that people almost have to be corrupt or have to additional income, let's turn it this way, so that they can survive. We were exposed in several projects, also more in the academia, that people, from the donors that gave us money to do the collaboration, we were of course not allowed to any payments outside of the official channel, but we learned this is impossible. You don't get anything done if you have to go. And then I have to see that I have to understand the people. They cannot survive. So I think for me the salary structure, especially in the public sector, is actually one of the key.
I think one of the key lessons is that how do you build the capacity building of capacity building organizations? And why I'm saying this is from my own experience in NIUA. We were implementing this capacity building program. And I think what is important is not just listing out those 3 priorities of individual, organization, and environment, but it is actually a capacity building organization should help in defining a strategy for any capacity building initiative at different levels in a country or in a project or in a program, which is not the case. So we normally just define it very generally like this. But for example, take FSM. It's a new initiative. In most countries, it's a new initiative, including India. So there, what is required at what time, at what level? In a new initiative, perhaps advocacy is more required than capacity building. So a kind of strategy is very important, and sometimes I feel there's a top-down approach. The capacity building organizations in the north look down and say, we will do your capacity building. But actually they never learn from what is happening on the ground. So I think this is, which is very important. And so we tend to get into capacity building strategies thematically, but I think that comes later.
So let us just, we need just to ask two questions for capacity development and 2 questions for corruption. I think we don't have that too much time. Who's going to ask about capacity development?
And I thought that I'd take the opportunity to ask another question. Yeah, but thanks for all the presentations. I realized that the lady who talked about capacity development, at some point, she talked about not talking about capacity building, but at some point she was using capacity building, so I got confused. So, but then, I just want to say something about WIN, fighting corruption in water worldwide. It sounds like you're taking arms and, you know, bulldozing, kicking doors and fighting corruption. I think most of what you're doing is trying to strengthen systems and build processes, and you're not like the International Criminal Court where you can take people in, lock them up, you know. So I think you can make this phrase much more palatable so that you get your foot in the door and then you do your work. It will be much better. And then about SuSanA, lots of information. I think I hope we have a process where we have the less abridged version of all the presentations that we can take time to go through and get some knowledge from. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I think that's why it's not called water corruption network. That's why it's called integrity network. I think that, of course, the integrity aspects are, of course, that's more the positive aspects, right? You don't want to kind of highlight what, you know, so you're kind of keeping the positive symbol of making it, having integrity in the organization or in your utility or whatever is actually the opposite of what you're actually often seeing, right?
Corruption questions? Corruption questions? She asked.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very important part is the integrity work. And I think just to link to this, the entire digitalization, which is happening in many sectors at the moment, offers so much of suddenly transparency going to all the different levels from, for example, national level, subnational level, school level. I just know it from the area of washing schools that this monitoring process, which is really happening in many schools now, suddenly shows which schools are doing the monitoring, who's not doing it, and then looking at what the figures they present, and they have to, in most cases, also on school level, to gather the data together with the parents. So this will help a lot to bring transparency and anti-corruption strategies without going through the door of anti-corruption. It's the door of transparency and accountability. It's about who's accountable to do that, and this will be seen by everyone. And I think these are things which are happening, and we should be very happy about this entire digitalization, which helps this process a lot.
Do you want to rec chat? Or is that fine?
It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, there's one more.
I'd like to ask a question about the integrity and corruption and anti-corruption issues. So one of the major things that I've been seeing is that because everybody wants to work on integrity and let's say fighting corruption in the water sector, the mechanisms of financing and reporting to donors has been so impossible that it makes work in the field absolutely horrendous. It just makes the work of organizations who are implementing these projects really hard. So sometimes you can't really do things in the time frame that we want. Things take so much longer because procurement issues are harder. You have to get a 3-bid analysis and blah, blah, blah. And I understand the basics of it, but sometimes certain donors make it so hard that it makes work actually harder, which defeats the whole purpose. So is anybody actually thinking about this? Maybe fighting corruption or in the water sector or like increasing integrity or blah, blah, blah should be done in a better way that it doesn't make our life harder.
Very good point, thanks. I also have sometimes the feeling the more control, the more difficult it is actually get things done. But do you want to react to that? Have you come across that as an argument, or maybe Frank, if you want to also answer? Let's give a mic sometime.
Well, I think I don't know of any evidence, that more control. Obviously, more control may take more time, but I think all the evidence points at the fact that when you have better systems in place which control your mechanisms, that you have much better results, certainly also in terms of sustainability, for instance, than when you don't have them in place. So obviously any effort or any requirements come with efforts, and they need to be balanced against the benefits they yield. But I think the overwhelming evidence points towards better control mechanisms having in place better results, and not only at the short term, but certainly in the longer term. I mean, it was mentioned before, the use of substandard materials, for instance, is something which you can easily skip in a system. It will be quicker, it will be cheaper, but obviously the result will be much worse. So I think all the evidence points in the direction that you need a good control system in place.
I think Antoinette? Yeah, Antoinette wanted to add.
Just before, I would like just to add a comment that corruption or working on institutional to assess the corruption in the institution is not that easy, and I have experimented in that. But I feel that, long story short, that lack of management, for sure, it will guide to corruption. This is for sure. But do we really to fight corruption, or do we really to make monitoring or make constraints or go in the direction to have effective management in that institutions?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a small comment on the control. I think one of the problems, and I see your point, we experience your point. I think the problem is there's a lot of effort on control on inputs, yeah? And if in some cases you can shift that control on inputs and procedures for inputs to accountability for results. And the whole idea of, okay, I give you fixed payments for certain results against key performance indicators, and how your process was to deliver that, it is, and it will not always work, but I think the focus on when countries start to decentralize, right, in Indonesia as well, they add on procedures because they think the districts aren't capable. At some point, there's so many procedures that they actually don't have an overview about what does what, and they see it just as jumping through hoops. And then I think we're in the wrong path.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to give the last comment or question. I'm not quite sure what it is, and then we'll have to wrap up.
I would just like to raise the attention to the importance of advocacy and of a consensus in the society that corruption is bad. I think that, when Berlusconi was elected, it was not for a lack of transparency. As long as you have a consensus, in Germany, we had heads of parties that were set up again that had been convicted for tax withdrawal. As long as you have a consensus in the society that this isn't a real offense, that this doesn't really, it doesn't harm, it's just, you just cheat the big system, and you don't have the conscience that corruption kills, and you don't have, as long as everybody feels, well, I would be doing the same thing if I was in that position, then I think transparency is not enough, because it won't lead to people, you know, really being outraged. So I think the advocacy is a very, very crucial part of the work.
I think that was an excellent closing statement. So capacity development of the values that we have in the society, and that comes kind of back to Sterenn's definition also of capacity development, not only individuals, organizations, but also of the society itself, and of course the values that the society has. So I'd like to pass over to the next session. I think we're done, and I think that's Shobana? Yeah.